With YouTube attacking alternative media, please consider supporting the channel via Patreon for just $1 per month. Link below. Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Matt Jarbo. This is 3 Buck Theater, and Ready Player One is about to hit theaters in just a couple weeks. And the other night was the world premiere at the South by Southwest Film Festival, and the response has been overwhelmingly good from what I have heard. I caught a lot of the reactions as people were coming out, and then the next morning there was no embargo, so they were allowed to post their reviews, which almost feels unheard of in this day and age to some extent. But Warner Brothers is confident that this movie will in fact do well, even though it's tracking on a little bit on the low side. They're saying around like 40 to 45 million opening weekend, if maybe not a little bit less than that. And so this is kind of the last push from Warner's to try to build up that hype. So they are allowing the reviews to come out 2 weeks early in order to get people hyped up for the next film in the very vast, very massive, mostly grand library of Steven Spielberg. And of course, this is a movie that I do feel that Steven Spielberg was the best person to direct. Given all the 1980s pop culture references that the book has, and a lot of it had to do with Spielberg himself, there's clearly going to be a level of love put into this movie, at least to kind of tell the story that someone like Spielberg could bring to the table. And from what I gather, it does have a lot of that Amblin Spielbergian magic, which, look, I'm not going to lie, I do feel we need more of that. You know, I do really feel like we need a lot more of that in movies. I haven't felt that in a long time, so to speak, and that it's like a warm blanket of my childhood. And you know what, nostalgia is grand in many ways. So this is the Rotten Tomato recap I like to do on my show, where I go through Rotten Tomato scores, look at the top 5 positive, the top 5 rotten, and to see where it kind of stands in the middle. So right now we're looking at a 78% Rotten Tomatoes score, which is good. And of course, by the time this thing comes out in a couple weeks, Rotten Tomatoes will surely certify it as fresh, even though that doesn't really mean much these days. But still, 78% based upon 23 reviews is not horrible. But as you can see, there are 18 fresh and 5 rotten. So if you don't know the plotline of the movie, allow us to so quickly recap on this one. In the year 2045, people can escape their harsh reality in the Oasis, an immersive virtual world where you can go anywhere, do anything, be anyone. The only limits are your own imagination. Oasis creator James Halliday left his immense fortune and control of the Oasis to the winner of a contest designed to find a worthy heir. When an unlikely hero, Wade Watts, conquers the first challenge of the reality-bending treasure hunt, he and his friends, known as the High Five, are hurled into a fantastical universe of discovery and danger to save the Oasis and their world. And there's already a couple things I feel like there's a bit of a change from the plot of the book. In the book, they're known as Gunters. They're hunting Easter eggs. It very much is a Willy Wonka type story. Everyone looking for the golden ticket, so on and so forth. And I mean, the thing is, the book doesn't hide the fact that it's clearly one big reference constantly. I mean, everything under the sun from the 80s was pretty much referenced here. And the movie is clearly making it out to be not only bathed in 80s nostalgia and pop culture, but clearly from the 90s and the 2000s and the 2010s. Hence why we've seen like a Tracer from Overwatch in the trailer, as well as Freddy Krueger and Chucky and Iron Giant from the night. Like, there's so many things that have come out that, you know, they're going to be putting into it. I'm pretty sure every single pop culture thing that Warner's has is going to make its way in here, including some others. I imagine all the references that we saw in the Lego movie, which was also Warner Brothers, put into this. And so I do feel like that's where we're going to see it, and that's ultimately okay with me. So let's take a quick look here at just the top scores from the top critics. So only 4 this time, but I feel these 4 are probably the best to look at. Now, Brian Talrelico, I'm saying that wrong, I'm sorry, gives it fresh, says here, when you're watching Ready Player One, you can almost feel the legendary director sitting next to you, laughing at the references, thrilled with the action, and eating his popcorn. You definitely need popcorn for this one. And that, I love seeing movies and eating popcorn. I've worked at movie theaters for about 14 years of my life, so trust me, my body is probably made of like 98% popcorn at this point, but I still love sitting there with a tub of popcorn and watching a movie. It's a guilty pleasure, but that's good. I like that reference there. Eric Cohn from IndieWire says, eventually Ready Player One becomes the very thing its characters admire, a preponderance of commercial entertainment smashed together into a singularity of blockbuster chaos, which, that's not a bad thing. And I mean that legitimately. Like, look at our blockbusters from 2017. The blockbusters that came out that summer were few and far between, with most of the money being made in April, May, and June, and July and August were kind of dead. And then picking up again in September with It. So ultimately, like, getting a good summer blockbuster feel, I think is kind of the key point here. You know, we used to have that a lot in the 80s and the 90s. Lately, because Hollywood tries to cram out so much every single year, the blockbuster has kind of gone away. And if this actually finds a way to bring that back, I'm 100% on board. Now, Owen Gleiberman here from Variety says, it's an accomplished and intermittently hypnotic movie. You may feel like you're occupied more than you are invested. Now, that could also be from the fact that the story itself is from what I can gather from the trailers, vastly, vastly different from the book. Now, the movie was written by Zach Penn, who wrote X-Men 1, X-Men 2, and originally pitched the first Avengers story, which is what Joss Whedon adapted to what we saw in films. And of course, Ernest Cline wrote the book in his follow-up book Armada, which is another story about video games and everything else. And so you can see where Ernie's coming from. And the way that Ernie wrote the book is very basic. It's very simplistic. It doesn't require a huge, I guess you could say, like, mental taxing investment into writing it or into reading it. It's just an interesting story that tends to just kind of hit you with pop culture references every 2 pages or whatever, you know, from Wade's DeLorean that he drives around on planets with to, the fact that Serenity was the ship he was piloting and everything else. It's just a lot of that. And so you might be more invested in the references because of the nostalgia versus the characters, which is not necessarily a grand thing. I think I did like Wade's character. I liked Artemis's character. I liked the journey they were going on together. But because the story was predominantly told as Wade's singular lone adventure, because that's the whole point. He's competing against these people until basically towards the end. They're going to have to alter a lot of that this time around, and it doesn't seem like they maybe did that in the best possible way. Now, John DeFore from The Hollywood Reporter here says, a rollicking adventure through worlds both bleak and fantastic, Steven Spielberg's Ready Player One makes big changes to the specifics and structure of Ernest Cline's best-selling novel, but keeps the spirit and level-up thrills intact. And that's fine with me. That's fine with me. At first, I was a little angry when I saw the trailer and I saw some of the behind-the-scenes shots. And I'm like, what is Artemis and Wade doing together? Like, clearly, that's not the end of the freaking movie. So, like, what the hell, you know? And then she's like, welcome to the Resistance. Like, what is this? But if they keep the spirit, I guess the overall idea of the story intact, there are things I'm willing to overlook. This is, again, an adaptation. Adaptations are never going to beat the real thing. Therefore, the book is always better in that regard. But given the nature of the book and the references, this is something that would probably be better served as a movie, like a big movie versus something you could see in a book. Or, I mean, to be fair, maybe like a television series or something. Now, jumping over here to the Rottten scores, we get a bit more here. So you've got Jonathan Barkin from Dread Central saying, an overabundance of pop culture references can't save Ready Player One from its own mediocrity. 1 out of 5 or 1.5 out of 5. And that's not the best. But again, there are people out there that are going to love the pop culture references, and there are people out there that are going to hate the pop culture references, and there are people that are going to be in between. Now, Dan Caffrey from Consequence of Sound here says, at a certain point, though, Ready Player One wants to be appreciated as a film as well as a movie, no matter what Spielberg says, and that's where it begins to falter. And that, okay, that's an interesting take on it, because Spielberg, in his later career, right, has spent more time focusing on films rather than movies. And I think you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Go back to like the days of, like Hook. That's a movie. Jurassic Park. That's a movie. Could be argued as a film. Just saying, it's that good. Holds up all these years later. Perfect, right? Then you get to something like Minority Report and AI. Those are meant to be films, right? Those are meant to be films. Munich, for example. Look, just, let's go back to 2005 Spielberg. 2 movies that year. War of the Worlds in the summer, Munich in the winter. War of the Worlds is a movie. Munich is a film. That's the best way to describe it. And arguably, Munich was a much better film than War of the Worlds was. Loved Munich. But the thing is that's the whole point there. So Spielberg, if he's wrestling with the ability to like make a film that is artistic and classy and timeless, but also trying to still be a movie, that can be a problem. What I would just want to see out of this is something more akin to Tintin, because I fucking loved Tintin, right? I loved that movie. I want there to be more. I don't know why it's been so long. They promised me a trilogy, goddammit. So you got that. But then you look at like The Post that just came out, and that's a film. It was meant to win awards. It was designed to tell those kind of stories. And this might be where Spielberg finds himself in that trap. This is his first foray back into making a movie like this in a while, I feel like. Even BFG felt like a film. You know, War Horse, oh my God, that was a gut-wrenching film. But this is a movie that I think that is maybe not the one he should have come back with, if this is what he's trying to say, but one ultimately that that we get. But it might be a bit tonally battling one another. How about that? Now, Britt Hayes from Screen Crush says, cinematic equivalent of pop culture mashup T. Yeah, I read her review. I didn't really care for it. Monica Castillo from Guardian says, while the movie is visually whimsical with its design and neon colors, the weakness of the source material still pokes out. And of course, that's talking about the general storyline of Ready Player One. But like I said, Ready Player One is more like what you would find in terms of a mini-series or maybe even a single-player video game. How about that? Let's go with that analogy. A single-player video game is one I would argue would be the best way to describe it, because as he's hunting for the eggs, he finds the first one, he becomes the top dog, then it's his journey trying to go and find it, but he's up against other forces. He's up against, you know, Artemis, who's the love interest, but also a competitor. He's up against IOI and that entire freaking industry. He's up against other hunters. He's up against a lot of things. And since nobody wants to work together in order to share the profits, it's a very singular lone experience. And so I'm wondering if that is one of the things that they tried maybe replicating, but also kind of changing, and it just feels different from those who have read the book to those who haven't read the book. So, I mean, at this point in time, with the movie coming out in 2 weeks, I would argue don't even read the damn book. Don't even bother reading the damn book, because you're going to get a different story when you go to the theater. Wait till after you see the movie, then read the book. Now, finally here, Matthew Razik from Flixist.com says, the cultural references crammed in everywhere should have given the movie heart, but instead they feel like contractual obligations. And that, of course, is where I think there's a bit of a difference in terms of contractual obligations, because it's not so much that they're contractual, it's that they are trying to fill this world out. This world is kind of like mod and ROM central. Imagine Skyrim's Thomas the Tank Engine and how just out of place that feels every time it pops up, but it's still magically delicious like Lucky Charms. That kind of is the best way to represent Ready Player One, just the story. You know, they're sitting there, they're gonna go into battle, and they go, okay, well let's you know, call up Godzilla or something that we got. It's not Godzilla. It was like Astro Man or something. It was a Japanese mech that they had. It was a huge mech that comes in at the end in the book, you know, but they had to go and like do the side quest in order to get it, and everything else. And so it's kind of like, it's like that. All these things that are in the movie or in the book have to then be translated, which is why we've seen things like Tracer, and why we've seen things like Iron Giant that aren't set in the 80s. Never mind the fact that most of the cultural references that Ernest Cline made in the book had more to do with the 1980s and beyond. But he did mention Serenity, which is, you know, early 2000s. He mentioned other things that were from the 90s. So it's a mishmash, and obviously people like references, people like nostalgia, and so yeah, it makes sense that, you know, in the making of, they were going to try to put in as much as humanly possible. The only thing that kind of sucks about this is that Spielberg has said that he was not going to put in references to himself very often. Like, he wasn't going to play that up because he didn't want to be that guy, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but I feel like at this point, fuck it, why not? You should have done it. I mean, if everything else is there, like, why not? Give us Indiana Jones and a goddamn bullwhip. You know, give us the color freaking purple. I'll take that. You know what I mean? Or something along those lines. I'd be okay with that too. Just avoid AI. That movie sucked. But anyway, Ready Player One. Now I think we have a solid fundamental understanding of what exactly it is that that Spielberg was attempting to accomplish. I think the reviews give us a nice kind of middle ground to work with for expectations going in. But I do want to know your guys' thoughts about this. Be sure to let me know in the comments below. My name is, of course, Matt Jarbo. This has been 3 Buck Theater. If you haven't already, thumbs up the video, subscribe to the channel, check back often for more content from me. And if you want to see more, you can do so right now.